So my name is Koh Kim. I'm from Mobcrush. It's a live streaming community for mobile games. We're currently in open beta, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about eSports. Tons of discussions going on about what the future of eSports look like, how that will grow, where a lot of the opportunities are. But I'm specifically here to talk to you about kind of like the mobile space, because we truly believe that mobile is the way to take this to ubiquity, almost the likes of soccer. But let me set some context here just to kind of go through very quickly. You've probably heard this millions of times before, is that one of them is like, what is an esport? And really it's pretty much defined by, it's just a term for organized multiplayer video game competition, particularly between professional players. I do want to emphasize players in this state, because a lot of people talk about how do you create an esport, do you develop a game, like what's some of the ecosystem risks, and in the end, a game is always a game, right? And the reason why games become competitive, or there's people have said, there's specific game features that you need to develop, or there's specific experience you need to develop, but in the end, it's really about the players. It's the people, the game that you're making, that it's really all coming down to the players and what the game is made for. In one sense, it's how do you build an experience that not only people would want to play the game like inside, within it, but then also talk about it and discuss even outside of it as well. And that's kind of like one of the main kind of things that I just wanted to start with as I kind of go through a lot of the context and stuff. But it's always good to be grounded a little bit, is that esports players in itself are multicultural, multilingual, and diverse. In true sense, most video games, it really truly crosses cultures, language barriers. Everyone who watches a video game understands what the rules are, what's going on, what are the objectives, and there's really no need for anyone to really speak to each other. Everyone kind of has this understanding of like what's going on just inherently, which is actually very unique about competitive video games compared to any other traditional sport where teamwork requires some sort of communication and had. But there are actually really interesting visual cues that happen in esports that you don't normally see in a lot of traditional sports like soccer, basketball, or here football, and baseball. But let me just talk to you about how big esports is in general. I've seen all these numbers, but it's usually a good reminder to kind of take a look at how big it truly can be. And so going through some of the numbers is that esports is kind of already big to begin with, given that the number of years that it's taken. And so let's just compare, like, let's say viewership. So this is like number of viewers that happen for specific matches that happen, especially in major kind of pro sports. World Series 2015, Game 5, Kansas City Royals versus New York Mets. That had about 17.2 million viewers. In 2015, the NBA Finals, which was actually the most watched NBA Finals since the era of Michael Jordan, that Game 6 winning one versus the Warriors and the Cavs, they hit about 23.3 million viewers. And meanwhile, the NFL Super Bowl this year in San Francisco, my former hometown, that's hit about 111.5 million viewers, which is actually down below the highest peak, which was last year about 115 million viewers. And then let's talk about League of Legends World Final in 2015 in Berlin. That drew about 36 million viewers. So already you have a League of Legends sport, but actually, like, by definition, probably a smaller, I would say, an active player base, has already drew more viewers than baseball and NBA already. So in one sense, it's still not there as Super Bowl standards yet. And even if you can tell versus football or soccer, clearly not there yet. If you look at the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil, there were about 3.2 billion viewers that watched on TV. And about 280 million watched online or on a mobile device. And if you compare this, the World Cup happened over 4 weeks, 64 matches. And so that's pretty astounding that, esports itself, they haven't reached the biggest sport in the world, which is football. But why could that be, right? You look at all these numbers, you see all this hype that's going on. League of Legends Worlds over 2015 in Europe, there are 73 games over 4 matches, so pretty similar to what you'd see over the World Cup. They've attracted about 334 million total viewers, which is not bad. They attracted a lot more viewers than the World Cup did, even over their online channels. And the average concurrent viewers was about 4.3 million. And for seeing any live sport match to hit even in the millions, that's still a lot higher than what you see in basketball, what you see in baseball. But why could that be, right? Like, it's just like there's such a stark difference. I mean, everyone talks about esports. They talk about League of Legends. They talk about Dota. And really, it's just all about ubiquity in one sense. Is the way to really think about it is that League of Legends, if you think about like what it needs to require to play the actual game, sorry, this is kind of like, let me just get this point, is it probably requires what, like 3K PC, you probably need a beefy GPU. In one sense, you probably need 2 graphics cards to even run some of these games, especially like some of the more immersive games like Counter-Strike. But League, Dota, so it's like you probably need a pretty beefy PC. On top of that, you probably would need a really highly reliable internet connection. So in most parts of the world outside of like, let's say North America and Western Europe, you're unlikely to have this sort of equipment or access to it. So because on one hand, I mean, there's a lot of people in the world that don't have access to a personal computer, let alone even access to internet via desktop. But that gets a little bit different, right? In mobile, is that you already have about 2 billion mobile devices that are connected to the internet, and most of them can actually run pretty high-powered GPUs. But let's just talk about it as a business in itself. Is that esports right now is a pretty massive business. There are basically several segments of what composes of, let's say, the esports market. One comes in sponsorships and advertising, which makes total sense. In most professional sports, sponsorships and advertising do make up the biggest chunk of your revenue. It's not the prize pool, it's not your ticket sales, and it's certainly not some of your amateur and like micro tournaments, or also your merchandise. Really a large portion of that is advertising and sponsorships, which makes sense. While the second biggest one is usually fantasy and betting in itself, which also makes sense because if you look at the second biggest revenue bucket for most major sports, betting makes a significant part of that revenue as well. And Asia continues to dominate if you look at the breakdown. So for a long time, since the 90s, Korea, China dominates the market in terms of this revenue growth. You already have esports player making 7-figure sponsorship deals, especially in China. But North America is actually not that far behind. I mean, like last year, they've hit about $224 million, and US makes up 96% of that. So who knew, right? The United States has caught up almost to China and Korea in terms of like the esports market itself. And Europe is also like, they're not doing too badly with 172 million. So it's a very big business that's also projected to grow like even beyond that. And so like, I think right now the current figures are doubling to 1.8 billion. And then I just can't spell today. So anyway, and then one other thing with the traditional sports networks, I mean, you had ESPN that's opened up their news networks in itself. Also, Yahoo Sports just announced that they're opening up their esports section last week. And then Turner just bought deals for Counter-Strike Go to be filmed in the US. So a lot of big sports networks are taking notice too. And a lot of big, even major team owners like Mark Cuban, several of the like, you know, team owners who are in the GMs who are like of professional sports are also looking into investing in a lot of these esports teams as well. But why will mobile, now getting back to the original topic of why will mobile push esports mainstreams, I've kind of hinted at one thing, it being hardware, but in one sense, mobile games are definitely becoming a lot more immersive and designed to be watched. I think this is a very important aspect of when was the last mobile game that you remembered that was actually fun to watch? Anyone? Probably not. And this is actually a very interesting point, because if you think about how mobile games are actually designed to begin with, it was really just about your small screen, right? Like, they were really focused really hard on how do you keep a player just looking at this screen and actually keeping a lot of the UI, the engagement, the gameplay, like how does it all concentrate on the big screen? And then when moved to online multiplayer, they think about, okay, how do I make it easier for people to communicate and interact? But then slowly but surely, a lot of these mobile games, and this is what happens when you have better hardware, better network infrastructure, a lot of stuff. How do I make these games a lot more immersive? I mean, you're already having like mobile versions of some of the top games that you're seeing on Twitch already being developed and actually growing really rapidly. And I think a lot of these developers, especially this year, are really thinking about how do I actually make my mobile game to be designed to be watched? How do I engage a player who's not necessarily active or a very avid player, but get them excited to come back or even notice like what's it like in some of the elder game. And so this is actually going to be a really interesting trend that you're going to see, especially the rest of this year, as how are these games going to be a lot more interesting to be spectated. And one of the things is, like, as everyone knows, mobile has just massive market size and reach. I talk about ubiquity. I talk about how do I get a device in every single person's hands. And what's really holding esports back to me of why I think League of Legends, Dota, as great games as they are and great, awesome communities, it's still very small in terms of the number of people involved versus what you could hit with mobile. And this is really important, right? Because I've talked a lot about the barriers to entry. You need really beefy PCs. To even stream, you need even beefier PCs, if not Macs. Very complicated software setups. You really need a reliable internet connection to even make some of these things work. And so a lot of that combined the fact that really it's hard to get a stable LAN connection in some parts of the world, especially in Indonesia, India, and a lot of things, is that PCs are just out of the question, right? It's just not gonna be part of anyone's selection set for like consuming a lot of this content. And this is why mobile is interesting, because there's already 2.1 billion people with mobile devices. And if you look at the PC gaming market in itself, there's 700 million gaming capable PCs out there out of a global install base of 1.5 billion. So far already, you already have mobile eclipsing even the number of PCs that are out there right now. And in most part, in terms of the turnover rate that you see for a lot of mobile devices, they're going to be a lot more, lot newer. They're going to be a lot faster. And year by year, the hardware specs for a mobile device is quickly becoming a lot faster, a lot more powerful. And the greatest part of this is actually connected to the internet. And so by the end of 2016, there's a projection that there's going to be at least 3 billion touchscreen devices that can run competitive games that are multiplayer, games designed to be watched by the end of 2016. And that's significantly far more than what you're going to see on the PC front. In addition to this, mobile is a lot more accessible. I talk about ubiquity. I talk about really how to make it really easy for people to get in and out of the game. Smartphones, for one, allow for an immediate download of the game. League of Legends, Dota, as far as I know, with the patches and the client, it's already hitting about more than a gig, maybe about 2 gigs. In some cases, each patch is about like several hundred megabytes. In most parts of the world, that is really effing expensive. So in one sense is that you're locking out an entire emerging market. If you look at some of the top markets for app downloads, if you look at even just like rising revenue, out of 5 of those markets, like none of them are in Western Europe or in North America. It's really about markets like Brazil, Russia to some extent, Mexico, India, Indonesia, Philippines. And what's really interesting about a lot of these markets is that there's consumers that are like high frequency of social interaction, much higher than what you see in the US and in Western Europe. Also, rabid voracity for gaming content. If you ask a lot of the kind of YouTuber creators that we've worked with, Twitch streamers, et cetera, a lot of these content creators, a lot of their viewers in the top 5 are from Southeast Asia and a lot of these emerging markets, which shows that there is this appetite for people to watch these games, and those are mobile-first markets in one sense. And which gets to my next point is that mobile really does mean freedom and a lot more social interactions, in that whenever you take your mobile device with you at all times, your PC is stuck to your living room. I've yet to see someone carry their PC with them to all these trips. I'm an avid gamer. I've played a lot of games since I was 4, including all the usual StarCraft Blizzard games, and probably way too many hours have been left into Counter-Strike. But as one is on the road, it's really hard to bring your consoles or your PC with you. And as much as like gaming laptops are a lot more powerful, it's not really that convenient. So mobile is actually very interesting because this device is with you at all times. I don't think anyone can raise their hand that they left their mobile phones at home. And some of you guys probably have more than one mobile device on you that's actually connected with data. And this is really astounding if you think about the number of play sessions that are gonna happen while you're on the go. It's just that much more opportunity, and then it kind of brings it outside of the bedroom in itself. And really, mobile is primed for digital marketers and data-driven growth. I think this is a really important point because, as I mentioned, advertising sponsorships make up the biggest part of any sports revenue. In the end, a lot of this, whatever you spend on advertising, the way that most marketers or most people will justify it to their higher-ups is this going to convert to a sale? Does this drive brand awareness and all this? And with a mobile device, you can actually truly track that, because not only do you know what's happening or what games they're going to watch and what they're going to watch, but it's with them at all times. And that's highly valuable compared to some of the more PC console-driven esports. It's really hard to kind of track that sort of conversion of sale and all that, whereas on mobile, it's really different. That's easily trackable. Or at one point, it's a lot better to track than what you'd see on the PC and console front. But then there's always a question of what's holding mobile on esports back. Like, there's all this data surrounding kind of like this growth and all that. And in the end, it's really an ecosystem, right? I've said before, games have to be designed to be watched to begin with, and not a lot of mobile games have been designed to be watched, probably outside of Vainglory, soon to be released Clash Royale, and even to some extent Minecraft Pocket Edition, but it's usually the PvP servers of Minecraft Pocket Edition. So not a lot of them have been kind of designed to watch from the ground up, so it'll be really interesting to see how games will change later this year and how that will affect that. The next thing is really about network infrastructure and hardware fragmentation. It's still, depending on, as much as it's improved, we still have a long way to go. Streaming a lot, watching a lot of live streams does take a lot of data. Playing these games, in one sense, it does take a lot of horsepower, and so it'll take some time to kind of catch up to that. But in one sense, where mobile is now, no one would have thought it would be at this point even 5 years ago. So imagine what's going to be like in the next year, and a lot of that starts accelerating. Thinking about like the NBA, like how that formed to have like an actual be a professional organization, it took 30 years. It took esports in general probably about a fifth of the time to do that. So just imagine how quickly things will come even after that. One thing is about formalized esports organizations and regulations. This is not just happening for mobile esports, this is esports in general. Having a players union or some sort of organization that kind of defines how like players could be represented, what are their rights and all that stuff, that's have yet to be defined in any competitive gaming realm whatsoever. There's a lot of activities surrounding that, so that's one thing that's going to be really important to kind of keep, I would say, especially to allow esports to even grow into that kind of level that you see with most professional sports. And the last thing I think is really important is just monetization options on esports. The average spend for an NFL fan is about $460. The average spend on an active League of Legends player is $4.95. So there is a lot of room for growth and a lot of opportunity to kind of fill in that gap for like esports to be truly begin. But that's really cool to think about because there's just so many different ways. People have thought about subscriptions, whatever, in-app purchases and a lot of stuff, but there's a lot more things that could be done on the competitive gaming realm in terms of making it as a business, and that's what's really exciting, is how can mobile kind of take that to that scale and volume that's needed, but then also really target on what users particularly want anyway. So that was, I think, the end of my talk in really fast. Wow, that was actually 20 minutes. So any questions? Thanks. So, questions?
Oh, yeah. Any questions? Well, I guess I'd like to start off with one question.
Sure.
Is there, for the mobile games that have been live streamed,
Right.
whether on a competitive basis or not, what are the particular genres of gameplay that get the most live streaming from mobile devices?
They actually reflect what you see on most PC and console games. The way to think about it is what's the mobile version of the most popular games being streamed on YouTube and Twitch, which are predominantly PC console games. And we have this, on our platform, even in beta, we're already seeing mobile versions of MOBA, actually in order, Minecraft PvP, we have Vainglory, which is basically a MOBA. You have Critical Ops, which is basically the Counter-Strike for mobile. You already have Clash Royale and it's like several like strategy type games that you traditionally would see, like the RTSs and all that of the world, just like the mobile versions of it. So it actually highly reflects what you see on the PC console side. So nothing truly different than what you expect, except they're just made for the mobile player. So.
Yep.
Hello. So when you talk about the gap in monetization of a fan of an NFL versus a fan of a esport, there's a huge gap there. So how is your platform going to help, with not closing that gap, but making sure that your streamers are monetizing and you're helping the game developers to, increase that LTV of the user?
I think in the current streaming, that's a good question. So in the current streaming, I would say platforms and kind of that systems, a lot of them, there's like three parties, right? One is viewers, the other is broadcaster streamers, and the third party is the game developer. And so it's really interesting, this is like a three-party system that's going on. Most monetization systems have only built to satisfy two of the three. I would say two of the three parties in the ecosystem, so which means it's highly inefficient. So no matter what monetization option you're going to use, a third party is going to be literally left out no matter what you do. And so, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. I think some of the bigger opportunities is that once you start making a game designed to be watched, and you see in most mobile games, monetization is about 2 to 5% of your active player base. Imagine what you can do with people who are watching the game if you have a ways to enable monetization for the spectators who are watching their favorite players or their, like their favorite competitive players or their favorite teams, right? Like you see a lot of this in TI. You have fans coming up to their favorite teams, gifting skins worth thousands of dollars to their favorite players just so that they can have the opportunity to see their, like basically their favorite lane player like play with that skin on Lena, and like a lot of that hasn't happened on the mobile game front or just in gaming in general. Building that system, that was literally some fan giving a code, physical code, to their competitive player to be like, play this in my game. Imagine if you could do that just digitally and like in a way that's very seamless. Other ways to think about it, I think the marketplaces for streamers have been incredibly lacking. One way to think about it is a lot of these streamers and broadcasters actually have great personal brands. They've built their audiences. They're able to attract an audience that's highly engaged and come back to them on a recurring basis. And so, but there's not a lot of options for them outside of subscriptions and donations to support the content they're making, right? And so what are some better ways, I would think, to make more efficient, to allow a viewer to be more efficient in terms of like valuing their favorite broadcasters, whether that's creating marketplaces, let's say, for a broadcasters themselves to be like, hey, I'm gonna go sell, like, let's say my own offline merchandise or sell only my own branded digital content. And then on the flip side of that, just for viewers, is how do they kind of can support like more than like a transactional base? Like what are some other ways that they can engage and support a broadcaster too outside of the fixed options? So there's a lot of other stuff, but that's another 20-minute talk. So.
Thank you very much for walking us through this this opportunity.
Thank you.